This one here?
Yeah. Doesn't look super big, right?
Right.
Look at the person on it.
Where's the person?
Exactly.
Oh.
The person is like, oh, okay, that's a human on that.
Yeah, that's a big bump. I like this one bigger.
Beach walk. I don't think it's supposed to rain, but I don't know. And I think I saw an interesting thing, and I'm gonna put that up later. It's about the process of, coffee farming, and you'd say, oh, that's not, very interesting or whatever. But unless you know, it's really quite amazing. And there are comparisons between, peoples here as well as those people who farm coffee. So we'll take a look at that later. I'll probably put a video I saw up so you can see that process. Put that video up next. It's like a 8-minute video, and I would suggest that you, I can't make you, of course, but spend the time and watch it, because it's very interesting. And I mean, even if you drink coffee, and that's about the extent of your interest, seeing what actually happens. This is only one of the steps that coffee has to go through. And then after it's done, or you can skip, I'll put a little bit more commentary about it all, and farming and everything else.
This is Finca Vista Hermosa in northwest Guatemala, in the department of Huehuetenango. This is on the Cuchumatanes Mountains. Coffee is produced between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, and it requires a very stable temperature, a fixed amount of rainfall that's consistent from year to year. These are different houses where people pick seasonally live. We're looking across the range here. Underneath this canopy of shade is coffee. Most of it is Bourbon, and intermixed is some Caturra and some Catuai. We have some different types of shade, some that are natural trees that are native to the area, as well as some Inga, and intermixed as well are some fruit trees, bananas, apples, oranges, lemons. Picking coffee is an activity that's done together as a family, and so you rarely will see adults without kids. They're together as a family from when the day begins to when the day ends. The higher the elevation, or the more shade, or the more organic the fertilizer may be, the slower the bean develops, and this allows for more complexity. It allows for more character. And this is all shaped by the land and the microclimate as well. Coffee oftentimes is produced in areas that are extremely steep, and thus must be picked by hand. It's very labor intensive. One tree gives about 1 pound of roasted coffee. And on a steep mountainside, it's impossible to use tractors to pick. And to pick the very best quality, it needs to be picked when ripe. And it requires 2 or 3 passes. And it's all done by hand. Because of the steep terrain, it's difficult to get vehicles close to all of the coffee, so it's picked by hand and then it's carried through trails to different points where maybe it will be wet milled or moved with a donkey or a pickup truck to a central location. And then people will gather there towards the end of the day and turn in what they've picked. And this is all picked in cherry. And throughout the harvest, it's ideally picked when it's perfectly ripe and red. And the coffee cherries are then accumulated in the receiving area. They're measured and weighed, and people are paid based on volume that they pick. And all of this coffee is, as you can see, a lot of labor goes into it, but it's all it's all been touched by hand in the entire process up until export. The amount of labor that goes into producing 1 pound of coffee is tremendous. That weight that you see the girls carrying is probably about 150 pounds. Out of every 100 pounds of cherry, we might get about 20 to 25 pounds of parchment, and that's coffee that's golden and dried. And this here is defective coffee that we sort out. There's coffee that floats like this here, and there's coffee that sinks, and those are treated differently. This here is the depulper. This removes the skin, which is sent one way and mixed with dirt, as well as some sheep manure for compost and fertilizer. And what isn't depulped is recycled. You can see some cherries there that didn't get their skin removed. Once the skin's removed, then they go into a fermentation tank on the right, and they'll rest there for a varying amount of time depending on the temperature. Ironically, the only part of coffee that is not used is the fruit, and what we drink is a result of processing, a lot of processing, but it's the seed that we roast and grind and brew to make coffee. After the coffee is fermented, it then gets washed, and this is what you see here. It's a thorough washing that completely agitates the coffee so that most of the mucilage that has been fermented off is removed. Any last bit that is attached to the bean comes off at this stage. And a clean coffee requires much careful attention in every stage leading up to this point. From here on out, quality cannot be added, it can only be maintained. And so attention to detail is very important. In drying, the best form of drying might be sun drying because it allows for a consistent and natural drying of the bean, which allows a separation of the parchment from the bean itself in a uniform manner, and it allows for the moisture content to be brought down to be between 10.5% and 12% moisture content, which is where the coffee then needs to be for dry milling and then for export. Once the coffee is dry enough, it's bagged up and warehoused, and often maintained in a warehouse so that the humidity can become homogeneous. So we don't have coffees that are a little bit more wet and some that are a little more dry. A long day of picking coffee can end as early as 2 in the afternoon, because one might start at 5 a.m. or it might end at 4, 5, 6 in the afternoon. And people generally choose how long they pick, and they will turn in their coffee between 3 and 5 o'clock. And they can work hard and pick as much or as little as they want.
The Maya of today are proud of their Mayan heritage and keep alive the ancient traditions and community practices which give meaning to their lives. New markets are opening up for Highland Weiwei all over the world. Internet coffee auctions and cell phones have put this remote area on the map, and many small producers are now able to market their coffee for the very first time.
Coffee is the second largest commodity in the world, and many people, when they go to purchase a cup of coffee, never realized the great lengths that people have gone for that bean to get to their cup.
So hopefully you watched that whole video that I just put up, but you can see, and if you didn't understand the process of coffee before, that's really just the short version. When a coffee farmer in any of those countries, and the similar, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's Guatemala or Ethiopia or wherever it is, wherever coffee is produced, it's an incredibly labor-intensive process, like a lot of farming. And I mean, that's the price that is paid to farmers is really, I don't know how they can do it, you know, in all honesty, because it takes 2-3 years before you get the tree growing or the bush, and then it's a process after that of waiting, taking care of the plant, hoping everything goes well. It's like all agriculture. And then you go and you pick the beans, you bring them in, you get a certain price for them. You know, I've heard varying prices, you know, on their end that will, you know, they may get $100 for a 150-pound bag of beans. How do you support a family? And there's more to it than that too, because that's just the beginning part. Those beans are grown like that, and that's the world over. Everybody has to go. They're all pretty much hand-picked. There is a place that I've seen in Brazil that does use a machine, but most of the coffee crop in the world is all done, all picked by hand, all picked by family, and that's how it has to go. If you saw that little girl in the picture with the 100-pound sack of coffee beans draped over her head, that's all part of the farming thing. And the relation to here is that, you know, there's a lot of places in the world that are tough. Coffee is a tough farming business, and in those countries they can do a lot better than other crops. But here is tough too, because you have limited economies, and those economies don't let certain things happen. You don't have access to funding so you can grow, you can't get loans, there's not enough jobs. So there's a lot of similarities, even though coffee isn't grown here. Those type of developing countries still have all these problems. And coffee, you know, when you see fair trade and organic and all that kind of stuff, the prices paid are pretty incredible, considering that what the end consumer makes. So I just wanted you to know, and you should probably look into, if you do, you know, like coffee, look into all that goes, because that's just the beginning part of it. Then the coffee has to be processed, then it's graded, then it's bagged up and dried, and then put into containers that are, you know, get shipped around the world. And still, by the time you get it here, it's not that high of a price, really. So those farmers and their families, it's a really tough thing. So really, coffee should be $50 a cup. It really should be. And those poor people can make a living. So all of us who enjoy coffee, we have to thank them for, the best way to put it is, their sacrifice, because they don't make virtually anything for all that they have to put in. Will it change? I don't know. I mean, there's different people try to help different farmers so that they can better their crops, better their families, better their, you know, fair trade does some of that, but fair trade, you also have to join a group, you have to pay a yearly fee, you have to be inspected, all this kind of stuff. And some of these farmers, they don't have the money to join. That's the reality. They can't join. And unfortunately, I mean, I saw another video at another time where, you know, it was this giant warehouse and it was like the specialty coffee bags all over. And the guy said, well, where's the, you know, general basic coffee stuff? And the guy flips on this like light switch and it opens up to another warehouse and it's just like stacked to the ceiling with this other coffee that's, you know, lower grade, more of just a general commercial type stuff. And I can imagine that stuff must be like pennies a pound. So just remember that when you're having a coffee. A lot went into, long before it ever got roasted, those farmers from around the globe who have helped produce that.